The uniqueness of Christ in Europe. Everywhere, when we read in the Gospels, the question of the identity of Jesus is there. It's one of the key questions. We have read from the Gospel of John this morning. If we turn to another Gospel, like Matthew, the question of who is this man is there all the time. And people are ascribing different identities to Jesus. From the lowest, the worst. People saying, you are the devil, the Beelzebul. Others trying to be more humane, saying, no, he is the carpenter's son. So he's a human being like you and me. Others trying to elevate Jesus, saying he is a prophet, like Elijah or Jeremiah. Others say, no, he's more than that. He goes beyond that. He's the son of David. He's actually the Messiah. And they even confess him Son of God. And the implication is not Son of God as Adam was the Son of God, or as Israel can be said to be the Son of God, or as the king can be the Son of God. But the implications are that he is Son of God in a unique sense. So they even worshipped him. And wherever you study the Gospels, this comes at the forefront, the identity of Jesus and the claim that he surpasses everyone else, that he is absolutely unique, and you cannot compare him with anyone else. To take another passage in the book of Matthew, where Jesus is repeatedly said to be the greater one. One greater is here. And he's compared, and it said, one greater than the temple is here. You know, the place for God's presence, the place for atonement. The temple, so important in the covenant. And now one greater than the temple is here. Further in Matthew 12, one greater than Jonah is here. Jonah, one of the prophets, one of those messengers sent by God to proclaim his words. And now one greater than Jonah and then all the prophets are here. And even later in Matthew 12, one greater than Solomon is here, the great king with the world-famous wisdom. Here is someone that surpasses everyone. One greater has now come. And you cannot compare him to anyone else. That's the message of the Gospels, of the New Testament. Now, how does Europeans look at that message? It all depends on the lenses through which you look. And today in Europe, you have so many different lenses that people look through, and therefore evaluate this message in so many different ways. We are not any longer a monolithic culture, but we are a culture of diversity, of plurality. And people have all different kinds of lenses. So what kind of lenses are people looking through today, and even looking to Jesus through those lenses? Well, we have, and I would not be able to mention all the lenses, but we have the hardcore atheists, like Richard Dawkins, dismissing religion altogether, dismissing, of course, Christianity and Jesus of Nazareth. More recently, we have kind of softer version of the new atheists, becoming more existentialists. I'm at the moment reading Alain de Bottaine's book about religion for atheists. It's been translated into Swedish. And of course, he denies the existence of God and all claims about the identity of Jesus. But he sees the value of religion for existential and social and cultural reasons, and want to develop a religion for atheists because it helps us to live, it helps us to build a culture. We have a growing spiritual curiosity where people are tasting and testing different ideas, different practices. The day before I came here, my wife came home from the hospital with a brochure. It was about Tao practices. Now, this was a state hospital in Sweden having brochures about Tao practices for your own well-being. We have, of course, a lot of liberal Christians and liberal Christianity, and I have to make some references to Sweden. So, the latest issue of Swedish Church magazine, it's a magazine for pastors in the Lutheran Church especially. And one of the pastors, she's working in the Central Cathedral in Stockholm. She's writing an article on the resurrection of Jesus, saying that the view that this was a real historical event involving a physical resurrection diminishes the value of the gospel. That's an exact quote. We should not think about this as a real event. This is a story about the existential experience that we as human beings can have, that after darkness there can be light. And this is just a very powerful story. We have a lot of nominal religion, where people are referring to a Christian culture or a Christian history or a Christian nation. And we have a lot of media circus about the wife of Jesus and about Jesus not even being a historical person. This is the fragment on the wife of Jesus. So here are some of the lenses that people look through, and they look through those lenses when they are thinking about Jesus of Nazareth, creating so much confusion, of course. Are there any unifying themes here? Or is it just confusion? I think there are some unifying themes that we need to realize. Back in the 1930s, Bertrand Russell said this in one of his essays. It is possible that mankind is on the threshold of a golden age. But if so, it will be necessary first to slay the dragon that guards the door. And this dragon is religion. Now, that was his perspective. Religion is hindering us. In one sense, Bertrand Russell his wishes has not come true. Religion is still with us. The dragon is not slain. But some of his wishes have come through. We no longer in Europe have a real sense of transcendence. You can still find a lot of religious and religious sentiments, but we have no real sense of the transcendence, of a real God standing outside of the universe, creating this universe, being sovereign over this universe, and being able to break into this universe. So we have no God, and we have no real transcendence. And people are operating within this cultural perspective of no transcendence, even when they are religious. A lot of people put hopes into postmodernism, thinking this will break with the modernism of the Enlightenment and maybe bring transcendence back. In my view, that's a false analysis. The postmodern, whatever there is left of that, philosophically it's a dead movement, but culturally, whatever there is left of modernism, we need to see that the postmodern is born out of the modern. And the modern perspective was naturalistic. And therefore, what is born out of that perspective still lacks transcendence. Postmodern spirituality is, in my view, therefore, nearly always without real transcendence. And we are left with different versions of humanism, immanence, mysticism, pantheism, and not a real God standing above us, challenging us. With this very broad painting of the background, I see 3 challenges that we need to work with. There are, of course, many, many more, but I will try to highlight 3 challenges, which has to do with the place of reason, the possibility of knowledge, and the factual relation between us and God. So, firstly, reason. The place of reason when we are discussing God, when we are presenting Jesus. So much of the cultural discussion here goes on from the perspective of Groucho Marx. Those are my principles, and if you don't like them, well, I have others. So we have lost so much of a conviction about real truth, and we just operate within this relativistic frameworks with principles that for the moment feels good and seems applicable, but then we change them 2 minutes later. So we hear a lot of sentiments relating to religion that goes this way. So for example, Cassius Clay or Muhammad Ali saying religions all have different names, but they all contain the same truths. Do they? Or Mahatma Gandhi, I believe in the fundamental truth of all great religions of the world. And I believe that if only we could, all of us, read the scriptures of the different faiths from the standpoint of the followers of those faiths, we should find that they were at the bottom all one and were all helpful to one another. Is that true? Let's use reason to evaluate this kind of claims. Think, for example, about the view of ultimate reality and listen to the different religions, what they are saying. They are presenting totally contradictory views of ultimate reality. So in Buddhism, they talk about emptiness and nothingness. In Hinduism, they talk about a spiritual reality, but it's impersonal, the one, Brahman. In a huge contrast, Judaism talks about the personal creator God. Islam affirms that, but stresses the absolute unity of the creator God's being. And Christianity, of course, affirms the personal creator God and that he is a unity in his being, but at the same time, there's diversity of persons in one being. So there is a trinity. God is a relational God. Now, all this cannot be true. Those different claims exclude each other. They can all be false, and the truth be something that no one so far has formulated. But they cannot all be true. It's impossible if we use reason. Or think about the identity of Jesus. Who was Jesus? And listen to the different answers even from the 3 religions that are most close to each other, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Judaism says we should reject Jesus because he was a false Messiah. He did not live up to his own claims of being a real Messiah. No, says Islam, we should honor him because he is a great prophet and messenger sent from God, but understood in human terms only. And Christianity says, yeah, he was a human being sent from God, but he was more. He was the eternal Son coming into this world and becoming a human being. So he is God incarnate, and therefore we should worship him. Now, it can all be false, but it cannot all be true. We need to choose. Those claims exclude each other. Or think of the most central aspect of the gospel, Jesus' death and resurrection. Islam says he did not die and he was not raised. Judaism says he died but was not raised. And Christianity says he died. And his death had significance. It was an atoning death. And he was raised and glorified by God. Now, it cannot all be true. You need to choose. There are claims that are exclusive. Maybe they can all be false, and the truth is something that no one so far has not been able to formulate yet. But it cannot all be true. C.S. Lewis says in one of his essays, "We may note in passing that he, Jesus, was never regarded as a mere moral teacher. He did not produce that effect on any of the people who actually met him. He produced mainly 3 effects: hatred, terror, adoration. There was no trace of people expressing mild approval." Now, this is a kick in the stomach of European culture, because we love to give mild approval, because it puts us in such a nice light of being open-minded and tolerant and affirming. But this is the only thing Jesus never had as a reaction, mild approval, because he was a life-chattering, challenging person. And people were put on the spot, and you need to take a stand for or against. Mild approval is out of the picture. Secondly, knowledge. If we can agree that there must be truth, and its opposite is then false, on a theoretical level, people can, often, if you have some time to talk with them, agree on that, of course. There must be truth. But then you come to the second question: can we know that truth? Isn't the reality that we are just in front of a closed door? When it comes to questions about God and metaphysical things, when it comes to questions like the identity of Jesus or the resurrection of Jesus, we are in front of a closed door. No one knows what's on the other side. And my guess is as good as your guess. So even if there is a truth, no one of us knows the truth or have the possibility of knowing it. Therefore, we have to settle with this. This is how I see it. Like the American writer Heinlein says at one place, theology is searching in a dark cellar at midnight for a black cat that isn't there. To try to say anything about God is totally meaningless. There is no way ahead in this project, so we better just leave it. Much of that has crept into European Christianity. So the former archbishop in the Lutheran Church in my country in Sweden, K.G. Hammar, he often talks about we need to distinguish between God with small letters and God with capital letters. God with small letters, that is my picture of God, how I view God. God with capital letters is who God is in himself, and that no one knows. We need to limit everything to who God is for me. And we can exchange our pictures of God like we exchange pictures of rock stars or hockey players. But we cannot go beyond that because no one knows who God is in himself. So we become agnostic about truth in this way. He can say in another place that in previous times, people thought of a God being outside the universe and then breaking into the universe in Jesus Christ. But he then said, when our thoughts today search for support, most people imagine that God is approaching human beings from the inside, from the cosmic depths that every human being is a carrier of. So God is reduced to something within the human being. Theology is replaced by anthropology. Whatever we say about God is actually just a message about ourselves and our thoughts and our feelings, not about a God who is really there. Now, in the gospel, the situation is, of course, completely different. And we heard in the exposition earlier about how no one has seen God. but God from his side has broken into this world, and through Jesus Christ, God is revealed. And to continue to read from Matthew, Jesus talks about things being hidden and then things being revealed. That God has opened the door from his side and has done that in Jesus Christ. So there is a revelation. Now, it is a surprising, unexpected, and humiliating revelation. It's not a revelation on our terms, so we need to be open for God's revelation coming to us on his terms, because otherwise it can be hidden for us. But it's actually there because God is a God who has revealed himself in Jesus Christ. Now, you can agree that there is a truth, and maybe people can accept the thought of, well, knowledge can be possible if God has opened the door. But then the third question comes up. What then is my relationship to God? You know, you can know your father's existence. You can even know quite a lot about your father. I'm now talking about your biological father. And what kind of person he is. And you can still be separated from him. There can still be things lying in between the two of you that is a hinder for an open, a warm, a real relationship. So this is the next aspect. What kind of relationship do I have? And here again, the gospel really provokes us. Listen to Jesus in Matthew 11. Jesus says this, "All things have been committed to me by my Father. No one knows the Son except the Father, and no one knows the Father except the Son, and those to whom the Son chooses to reveal him." We could talk a lot about this verse. Just let me highlight 3 facts that Jesus is telling us about our relationship to God. Firstly, that the Father is known, but only by Jesus. We do not have this intimate relationship and knowledge of the Father. Only Jesus has. But the Father can be known, but only through Jesus. He is the only one who can open up real knowledge and real relationship for us with the Father. And now everything, according to Jesus, has been committed to him, so that we are dependent on Jesus, on his initiative, if a real relationship, a real knowledge and real relationship will take place. Because ultimately, only Jesus knows the Father. Ultimately, only through him can we know the Father. And we need to humble ourselves before Jesus, being dependent on his initiatives. So here I would like to challenge our European culture. Are we open to use reason, to really think through the issues? Are we open to search for knowledge? And are we open to acknowledge our own position? That we are dependent on someone outside ourselves to solve these questions. Now I lost track of my time. Do I have any time left, or? Yeah. Like 5 minutes? Okay. Very shortly, if you study Acts 17, Paul before the Areopagus, you can see that he is using those 3 categories of reason, of knowledge, and of relation. Just let me just read the speech in Acts 17. Paul then stood up in the meeting of the Areopagus and said, "People of Athens, I see that in every way you are very religious. For as I walked around and looked carefully at your objects of worship, I even found an altar with this inscription, to an unknown God. So you are ignorant of the very thing you worship. And this is what I'm going to proclaim to you. The God who made the world and everything in it is the Lord of heaven and earth, and does not live in temples built by hands, and he is not served by human hands, as if he needed anything. Rather, he himself gives everyone life and breath and everything else. From one man he made all the nations, that they should inhabit the whole earth. And he marked out their appointed times in history and the boundaries of their lands. God did so that they would seek him and perhaps reach out for him and find him, though he is not far from any one of us. For in him we live and move and have our being. As some of your own poets have said, we are his offspring. Therefore, since we are God's offspring, we should not think that the divine being is like gold or silver or stone, an image made by human design and skill. In the past, God overlooked such ignorance, but now he commands all people everywhere to repent. For he has set a day when he will judge the world with justice by the man he has appointed. He has given proof of this to everyone by raising him from the dead. Now, if we had more time, we could go through then, and we need to stop the PowerPoint here. I need to just summarize a few things. We have more time? Okay. Okay, then go on with the PowerPoint. This is a fantastic speech from Paul. And I like an image that N.T. Wright uses about Paul being a chess player, playing with different opponents at the same time. You know, some of those masters are really doing that, going from one chessboard to another chessboard and winning over a number of people. And in this talk, Paul is, of course, arguing against the Epicureans and the Stoics and the polytheistic religion of Athens. And when he's doing this, he is firstly using reason. In his critique of what's going on in Athens, he's arguing out from a principle. What is worshipped must be higher than the worshipper. That is the whole essence of worship. You bow down before something that is higher, bigger, more ultimate than yourself. Otherwise, you wouldn't worship it. You would be worshipped. Now, his critique here is that the religious life in Athens, they are worshipping what is lower than what they are as human beings. Because they're worshipping figures of stone, and they're worshipping gold and silver, things that are made by human beings. So they are degrading themselves by worshipping something that is lower than they are. Reason would tell us we need to worship what is above us, not what is below us. Secondly, in terms of knowledge, Paul affirms a number of their insights. He is not saying they are totally without knowledge. He refers to an altar to the unknown God. They are on the right track there. He gives some quotes from Epimenides and Aratus, some non-Christian philosophers, who still are saying some true things, that we have our origin and being in him. He acknowledged that they are surrounded by what we call general revelation. God is not far from any one of us. We live and have our being within him. So they have some kind of knowledge. At the same time, he is very ambivalent. He's saying, perhaps you can reach out for him and find him. And at the end of the speech, he said, God overlooked such ignorance. So even though they have some grains of truth and knowledge, they are on the wrong track. I like what the New Testament scholar Ben Witherington is saying. The overall effect of this verse is to highlight the dilemma and irony of the human situation. Though God is omnipresent and so not far from any person, ironically, human beings are stumbling around in the dark trying to find God. When one is blind, even an object right in front of one's face can be missed. And that is the biblical picture. God is close at hand, but we are blind. Thirdly, from this point, Paul moves on to the question on the relation. And here he does something that I think we really need to learn to do in Europe. He goes from the universal, from the cosmos, from the world, from everything that God created, from heaven and earth, from everyone, from all the nations, to the most particular of, you can think of the man, of one man that God has appointed. So he moves from this universal perspective of the cosmos to one man, at one place, one time in history, one individual, and everything hinges on him. There is one man who is going to put everything right. There is one man who is going to restore the whole cosmos. God will use him to judge the world with justice. I think very few people in Europe realize this connection between the cosmos and the individual man, Jesus of Nazareth, and that everything hinges upon him. These are two different categories in our culture. What's the truth about the cosmos? And then Jesus of Nazareth. That's a totally different issue. It's not. God has appointed one man, and through this one man, everything will be restored. It will be a real event in history. God has set a day. We don't know the date, of course, but the day is set. It's a real event in real history when Jesus will come back to judge the world and to restore God's creation. How do we know this is true? Because God has given proof of this to everyone by raising him from the dead. The physical resurrection, who was denied by this Lutheran pastor in Stockholm, is actually absolutely crucial. It's the proof that he is the man God has appointed. And therefore, as a consequence, Paul, and this takes some courage, some guts, in front of all those polytheistic religious people and those philosophers, to say now he commands all people everywhere to repent. So he goes back to the universal. He moves from the cosmos to this individual person and then back saying everyone has to repent and relate themselves to this individual. We have looked at Matthew. We have briefly looked at Acts. Just let me finish by putting together some of the statements of the New Testament emphasizing the uniqueness of Christ. Jesus is unique. Why? Because he's the only way. Jesus is unique. Why? Because he's the only name under heaven. Jesus is unique. Why? Because he's the only foundation, and there can be no other foundation. Jesus is unique. Why? Because he's the only mediator between God and man, and that is the man, Jesus Christ. Thank you for listening. Thank you for giving me some extended time.